Forget everything you thought you knew about Renaissance fashion. This wasn't just about pretty dresses, it was about power, scandal, and showing off. In the heart of Florence, where the Medici ruled supreme, clothes weren't just worn, they were a battleground, a canvas, and sometimes even a crime scene. Get ready to uncover the shocking truth behind the threads that built an empire. Number 9. Opulent fabric, silk, velvet, and brocade mania. Walk through the bustling streets of Medici Florence, and your eyes would immediately be assaulted by a riot of color and texture, a testament to the city's absolute obsession with luxurious textiles. This wasn't just about looking good, it was about declaring your status to anyone who dared to glance your way. The true kings and queens of Florentine fashion were not just the wearers, but the very materials themselves: silk, velvet, and brocade. Florentine looms hummed day and night, turning raw materials into garments that would make modern designers swoon. The city's economic might was built on this very industry, the production and trade of these incredibly valuable cloths. Silk was the undisputed monarch. Its shimmering surface, its whisper soft touch against the skin, its ability to take on dyes with an unparalleled vibrancy made it the ultimate signifier of wealth. Imagine walking into a grand palazzo, the sunlight streaming through a high window, catching the light on a lady's gown. Every fold, every movement would cause the silk to shimmer and shift, creating an almost liquid effect. The sheer cost of silk meant that even a small piece of it was a luxury. A full gown made of pure silk could easily cost more than a small house outside the city walls. Records from the City Silk Guild, the Arte della Seta, frequently detail transactions involving vast sums of money for bolts of the finest silk. These aren't just dry financial documents, they paint a picture of an economy driven by luxury consumption, a city where fabric was currency. The silk came in countless forms: plain taffeta, crisp and rustling, lustrous satin, smooth and reflective, and damask, with its subtle woven patterns that caught the light in sophisticated ways. Each type had its place, from the crisp linings of a man's doublet to the flowing skirts of a woman's gamura. But if silk was the monarch, then velvet was its opulent consort, a fabric so rich it practically demanded to be touched. Florentine velvet was renowned across Europe for its deep pile and intense color saturation. Think of a velvet gown in a shade of deep crimson, so dark it almost looked black in shadow, but blazing with fiery intensity in direct light. Or a sapphire blue velvet, so profound it seemed to absorb all light, yet felt impossibly soft. And velvet, particularly cut velvet with its raised patterns, was incredibly complex to weave, requiring specialized looms and skilled artisans. This complexity translated directly into its astronomical price. Inventories from aristocratic households, like those of the Rucellai family, often meticulously list their velvet garments, sometimes even specifying the color and the intricate patterns woven into the fabric. These were not just clothes, they were heirlooms, passed down through generations, their value enduring for decades. Brocade, however, was the true showstopper, the fabric that screamed, "I am rich, and I want everyone to know it." Brocade was silk or velvet woven with additional threads, often gold or silver, to create raised, intricate patterns. Imagine a gown made of deep green velvet, but running through it are large, swirling patterns of gilded threads depicting pomegranates, artichokes, or mythological beasts. The metallic threads would catch the light with an almost blinding brilliance, turning the wearer into a walking, shimmering masterpiece. These patterns were not merely decorative, they were often symbolic, conveying messages about the wearer's family, their aspirations, or their piety. The weaving of brocade was an art form in itself, requiring immense precision and a deep understanding of textile design. The sheer weight of a brocade garment laden with metallic threads could be considerable, a physical manifestation of the wearer's economic heft. One did not simply wear brocade, one carried it. Documents from the Mercanzia, the Florentine mercantile court, reveal numerous cases involving disputes over the quality and price of brocade, illustrating just how valuable and contentious this fabric could be. Even the lining of these garments was often a luxurious affair. While outer layers might be made of heavy brocade or velvet, the linings could be fine silk, softer velvet, or even furs like ermine or squirrel, adding another layer of expense and luxury. The choice of lining wasn't just about comfort, it was about demonstrating that even the parts of your clothing that weren't immediately visible were of the highest quality. This meticulous attention to every detail, down to the hidden layers, solidified the message of ultimate wealth and discernment. The Florentine textile industry was a marvel of its time, employing thousands of people, from the raw silk suppliers to the master weavers, the dyers, the embroiderers, and the tailors. It was a complex ecosystem of craftsmanship and commerce. This industry fueled the city's banks, its art patronage, and its political power. The very threads of Florentine fashion were woven with ambition, status, and the unmistakable scent of money. The sheer volume of demand for these luxurious fabrics meant that supply chains stretched far beyond the Tuscan hills, bringing in raw silk from the east, dyes from exotic lands, and master craftsmen from across Europe. The city was a melting pot of textile innovation, constantly seeking new ways to weave, dye, and embellish their creations. This relentless pursuit of textile perfection made Florentine fabrics the envy of courts and palaces across the continent. To wear Florentine silk, velvet, or brocade was to wear a statement of unparalleled quality and immense wealth, a visual declaration understood from Paris to Constantinople. The city's reputation as a fashion powerhouse was literally woven into every shimmering thread. Number 8, color codes and symbolism more than just a pretty hue. In the vibrant tapestry of Medici Florence, color was far from a simple aesthetic choice. It was a complex language, steeped in symbolism, status, and astronomical cost. You didn't just pick a pretty shade, you chose a statement, a reflection of your family's history, your social standing, or even your political leanings. The dyes themselves were precious commodities, often sourced from distant lands, and the process of achieving certain hues was a closely guarded secret, a testament to the skill and expense involved. The most coveted and expensive color was without a doubt a rich, deep red. This wasn't just any red, it was a specific hue, known as Kermes red, derived from the dried bodies of tiny insects, Kermes vermilio, found on Mediterranean oak trees. To produce enough dye for a single garment required thousands of these insects, making the color incredibly rare and costly. Think of a cardinal's robes or a powerful merchant's cloak in this breathtaking crimson. This red was associated with power, passion, and the blood of Christ, lending it a profound spiritual and political significance. Its intense vibrancy, almost glowing, made the wearer instantly noticeable and marked them as someone of immense importance. Only the wealthiest families could afford to dye their finest silks and velvets in this shade. The records from Florentine dyers' guilds frequently indicate the exorbitant prices paid for Kermes dye, often more expensive than the raw silk itself. Another highly prized color was a deep, intense blue known as ultramarine. This magnificent blue was sourced from lapis lazuli, a semi-precious stone mined exclusively in Afghanistan. The stone had to be ground into a fine powder, a painstaking and difficult process, and then mixed with a binder. The resulting pigment was so costly that it was often reserved for painting the robes of the Virgin Mary in religious art. Imagine a woman of a prominent family wearing a gown dyed with this ethereal blue. And it was not merely beautiful, it was a declaration of piety and immense wealth, a testament to her family's ability to procure such a rare and exotic material. Contemporary Florentine portraiture, including works by Ghirlandaio and Botticelli, captures these vivid blues and reds, often used for the garments of their most esteemed patrons. Green also held significant symbolic weight. It was often associated with nature, renewal, and hope. A lush, verdant green could be achieved using various plant-based dyes, though the stability and vibrancy of the green could vary. A deep, rich green was still a challenging color to achieve and maintain, requiring skilled dyers. It was often favored by merchant families, perhaps symbolizing their prosperity and growth. Yellow, particularly a rich gold yellow, could signify purity, prosperity, or even jealousy, depending on its context and shade. While some yellows were easily obtained from common plants, the most brilliant and lasting yellows were harder to achieve, and often intertwined with the symbolic use of real gold thread in brocades. The black, despite its seemingly simple appearance, was one of the most difficult and expensive colors to achieve in a deep, stable form that would not fade to gray or brown. True, intense black required multiple dyeing processes and specialized mordants to fix the color permanently. For men, black was often associated with solemnity, gravity, and a certain sophisticated austerity, especially in later periods of the Renaissance. A man dressed in a perfectly dyed black velvet doublet would project an image of serious wealth and understated power, a stark contrast to the more flamboyant reds and blues. The records of tailors and cloth merchants often show the high cost of black wool and silk. White, while seemingly simple, was a symbol of purity, innocence, and often used for undergarments or for bridal wear. But even white could be costly if it was of the finest linen or silk, requiring bleaching processes that were time-consuming and labor-intensive. The purity of the white reflected the purity of the wearer, a subtle but clear statement. Beyond individual colors, combinations also carried meaning. The colors of a family's crest or stemma were often incorporated into their garments, making a wearer a walking emblem of their lineage. Think of a powerful family, perhaps with a crest featuring gold and blue. A member of that family might wear a gown of blue silk embroidered with golden threads, or wear a blue gamurra with a gold jornia over it. This wasn't just fashion, it was identity, a banner worn proudly. Sumptuary decrees issued by the priori, the city's governing council, meticulously detailed not just the types of fabrics allowed, but also often the colors, further underscoring the importance of color as a social marker. These laws often tried to restrict the use of certain vibrant, expensive colors to specific social classes, although, as we will see, these laws were often circumvented. The dyeing process itself was a hazardous, skilled trade. Dyers, often working with foul-smelling vats and dangerous chemicals, held a crucial position in the textile industry. Their ability to achieve vibrant, lasting colors was paramount, and their trade secrets were highly guarded. A skilled dyer could transform raw cloth into a masterpiece, increasing its value exponentially. The sources for dyes were truly global. The cochineal, another red insect dye, came from the New World, while indigo for blues arrived from India. Madder root produced a variety of reds and oranges. The journey of these dyes across continents, often fraught with peril, added to their cost and desirability. The presence of these exotic pigments in Florentine garments was a subtle nod to the city's vast mercantile networks and its global reach. So, next time you gaze at a Renaissance portrait, remember that the colors chosen for the garments were not random. They were deliberate, loaded with meaning, whispered secrets of wealth, power, and perhaps even a dash of rebellion against the strictures of society. Every hue was a carefully chosen word in the silent language of Florentine fashion, speaking volumes without a single sound. Number 7. Footwear practicality meets prestige, chopines, and patents. When you think about Florentine fashion, your mind probably jumps to grand gowns and elaborate headwear, but what about the feet that carried these magnificent creations through the city's cobbled streets? Footwear in Medici, Florence was a fascinating blend of practicality, status, and sometimes outright absurdity. While much of what people wore on their feet was hidden beneath long skirts or cloaks, certain styles made a bold statement, particularly the elevated platforms known as chopines and patents. For everyday wear, especially among the working classes, shoes were simple, sturdy, and practical. Leather boots or low-cut shoes, often made from cured animal hides, were common. These were designed for durability, capable of withstanding the rigors of walking on uneven, often muddy or refuse-strewn streets. The design was often straightforward, focusing on comfort and protection rather than elaborate display. Men's shoes, when visible beneath their shorter tunics or doublets, tended to be relatively plain, made of soft leather, often with a rounded or slightly pointed toe. They were designed for walking, riding, and the active life of a Florentine man, whether merchant, artisan, or soldier. But for the wealthy, and particularly for women, footwear could become a significant element of their public persona. The most dramatic example of this was the chopin. Though more prevalent in Venice, it did find its way into the wardrobes of the fashion-forward elite in Florence. Chopins were essentially platform shoes, designed to elevate the wearer significantly off the ground. Imagine walking through the narrow, sometimes unsanitary streets of Florence. A lady wearing chopins would not only protect her delicate silk and velvet gowns from the grime of the street, but she would also gain considerable height, making her stand out in a crowd. The height of chopins varied dramatically, from a modest few inches to astonishing heights of over 20 inches, turning walking into a precarious balancing act. Accounts from foreign visitors often describe Venetian ladies needing servants to steady them as they navigated the streets on their towering chopins. While Florentine chopins were generally less extreme, they still served the dual purpose of protection and prestige. A woman on chopins was literally elevated above others, a clear visual metaphor for her social standing. The visible parts of the chopin, the upper shoe itself, could be made from luxurious materials like velvet or fine leather, often embroidered or embellished with pearls and precious stones, further signaling the wearer's wealth. Pattens, sometimes called zoccoli in Italian, were more common in Florence and served a similar purpose to chopins, but were generally more modest and practical. These were wooden or leather soles, often with straps, worn over an indoor shoe. They acted as overshoes, protecting fine indoor footwear from dirt and dampness when stepping outside. Think of them as the Renaissance equivalent of modern galoshes, but much more stylish and integrated into the overall look. They raised the wearer a few inches off the ground, enough to keep hems clean and dry. The clatter of pattens on the cobblestones would have been a common sound in the city, the sign of a well-dressed person moving through the urban environment. The materials for pattens varied. The simpler versions for less wealthy individuals might be plain wood, but for the elite, they could be covered in the same luxurious fabrics as the main garment, or even feature intricate carvings and embellishments. The underside of the pattern might have raised sections or metal strips to prevent slipping and to add to their durability. While the main body of a woman's garment might be heavy and voluminous, the hidden footwear provided a subtle but crucial lift, contributing to the overall elegant silhouette. For men, though less extreme, footwear also played a role. Elegant leather boots, often made of fine, supple leather that molded to the leg, were popular. They were often custom-made, reflecting the individual's taste and wealth. Decorative buckles or subtle stitching could add a touch of flair. The quality of a man's boots, their polish, and their fit would have been noticed by discerning eyes. Shoemakers or calzolai were skilled artisans, often members of a guild. Their craft involved not just leatherwork, but an understanding of anatomy and fashion. They would measure feet meticulously, crafting shoes that were both comfortable and aesthetically pleasing. The process of making a bespoke pair of shoes was labor-intensive and required specialized tools, making the finest footwear another marker of wealth. The sheer variety of leather types, from supple kidskin to sturdy cowhide, offered options for different purposes and price points. Dyes were used to color the leather, though the range of colors for shoes was generally more limited than for garments, often sticking to browns, blacks, and sometimes deep reds. Despite their practical function, shoes also held social significance. They could contribute to the overall impression of a person's diligence and care for their appearance. A scuffed or poorly made shoe would undermine the impact of an otherwise opulent outfit. The wills and dowry contracts from the period often list specific items of clothing, and occasionally footwear is mentioned, underscoring its value as property. The evolution of shoe styles, from the pointed pullaines of earlier centuries to the more rounded toes of the Renaissance, reflected broader shifts in fashion and aesthetic preferences. While not as overtly flamboyant as some other fashion elements, Florentine footwear, particularly the elevated chopines and patins, subtly reinforced social hierarchies and provided practical solutions for navigating a challenging urban landscape, all while adding a fascinating dimension to the overall sartorial statement. Number 6, the rise of the giornia, a flowing outer layer. If the gamurra was the foundational dress of a Florentine woman, the giornia was her public declaration, a flowing, often sleeveless outer garment that added an undeniable layer of prestige, drama, and visual impact. This wasn't merely a coat, it was a garment designed to be seen, to move gracefully, and to highlight the exquisite fabrics of the wearer's underlying ensemble. Its popularity grew steadily throughout the 15th century, becoming a defining feature of elite female fashion in Florence. The giornia was essentially an overgown, cut with full, often pleated skirts that swept majestically to the floor. What set it apart was its open sides, or sometimes wide, flowing sleeves that hung loose, allowing glimpses of the gamurra or kirtle worn beneath. This design was ingenious. It meant that a woman could display not just one luxurious fabric, but 2 or even 3, creating a layered effect that spoke volumes about her wealth and discernment. Imagine a woman entering a frescoed hall, her giornia of shimmering green silk, its open sides revealing a gamurra of deep crimson velvet, perhaps even embroidered with gold threads. Every turn, every gesture would create a dynamic interplay of color and texture. The movement of the giornia was crucial to its appeal. As a woman walked, the full skirt would billow and sway, creating a graceful, almost ethereal effect. Chroniclers written by figures such as Benedetto Dei described the splendor of Florentine women's attire, frequently remarking on the luxuriousness of their overgowns. The construction of a giornia was a testament to the tailor's art. While seemingly simple in its overall shape, the cutting of the large, flowing fabric, often on the bias to allow for a better drape, required significant skill and a substantial amount of material. The shoulders were typically fitted, often with small-cap sleeves or a wide, rounded shoulder line from which the generous fabric of the body cascaded. The front of the giornia was often open, sometimes fastened with a series of jeweled clasps or decorative laces, adding another opportunity for embellishment. These clasps could be intricate works of art in themselves, made of gold, silver, or set with precious stones. The collar, if present, was often wide and flat, or sometimes a soft, standing collar. The edges of the giornia, particularly the hem and the open front, were prime real estate for decoration. They might be edged with bands of contrasting velvet, embroidered with intricate patterns, or even adorned with fur trim, particularly ermine or sable, for added warmth and opulence during cooler months. The choice of fur was not just about comfort, it was a clear sign of extreme wealth, as sumptuary laws often attempted to regulate its use. The giornia was incredibly versatile. It could be worn over a variety of undergarments, from the formal gamurra to simpler kirtles. It provided an additional layer of warmth in unheated palaces and drafty churches, but its primary function was undoubtedly display. For formal occasions, a giornia of brocade, shot through with gold or silver threads, would be the ultimate statement. For slightly less formal but still elegant appearances, plain silk or velvet giornias in rich, saturated colors were common. The fluidity of the giornia also meant it could accommodate the evolving silhouettes of the era. As the gamurra sometimes became more structured, the giornia remained free-flowing, offering a graceful contrast. It was often worn by women of all ages, from young brides showcasing their dowry to elder matriarchs asserting their established prestige. The cost of a giornia was considerable, especially when made from the most expensive fabrics. The sheer yardage of silk or velvet required to create such a voluminous garment meant that only wealthy families could afford multiple giornias. Inventories from aristocratic households like those of the Friscobaldi family frequently list multiple giornias in different colors and fabrics, indicating the importance of having a diverse wardrobe of these essential outer layers. The giornia also symbolized a sense of modesty and propriety, even while being undeniably luxurious. Its full form enveloped the wearer, providing a sense of decorum appropriate for a society that valued outward displays of virtue, even as they reveled in opulence. This paradoxical combination of lavish display and perceived modesty made the giornia a perfect expression of Florentine elite culture. It was not just a piece of clothing, it was a carefully constructed facade designed to project an image of power, refinement, and impeccable taste. The way a woman carried her giornia, the slight rustle of the fabric, the subtle flash of the lining, all contributed to the silent narrative of her status. It was a garment that truly embodied the spirit of Medici Florence, a blend of magnificent artistry, shrewd commerce, and an unyielding desire to present oneself as a paragon of wealth and good standing. Number 5. Sumptuary laws when fashion fought the law. Imagine living in a city where what you wore was policed, where the very clothes on your back could land you in trouble with the authorities. This was the reality of Medici Florence, a place where sumptuary laws, designed to curb excessive display and maintain social order, were a constant source of tension between the government and its fashion-obsessed citizens. These laws were not just quirky historical footnotes, they were serious attempts to control an escalating arms race of luxury, a battle between civic virtue and individual vanity. Sumptuary laws were enacted by the Florentine governing council, the priori, with surprising regularity. The reasoning behind them was multifaceted. Firstly, there was a moral component. Civic leaders believed that excessive luxury led to moral decay, encouraging pride, envy, and an unhealthy focus on worldly possessions. They saw it as a threat to the city's republican values, which ideally promoted a sense of civic responsibility over personal indulgence. Secondly, there was an economic concern. The constant demand for imported luxury goods, especially fine silks, furs, and jewels, meant that a significant amount of Florentine wealth was leaving the city. By restricting luxury, the authorities hoped to keep money within the local economy and encourage investment in more productive sectors. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, sumptuary laws were about maintaining social hierarchy. In a society where status was paramount, clothes were the most visible markers of one's place. By restricting who could wear what and how much, the government aimed to prevent people from dressing above their station, blurring social lines, and causing discontent among the established elite. These laws were incredibly detailed, sometimes bordering on the absurd. They specified not just the types of fabrics allowed for different social classes, but also the number of pleats in a skirt, the width of sleeves, the amount of embroidery, the type and quantity of fur trim, the number of buttons, and even the size of pearls or gemstones. A woman's girdle might be legally restricted to a certain number of pearls, or a man's hat to a specific type of feather. The decrees even targeted specific garments, like the Gomorrah or the Giornia, dictating their permissible opulence. The enforcement of these laws was often comical in its futility. Special officials, often called ufficiali del lusso or similar titles, were tasked with patrolling the streets, observing citizens, and issuing fines. These officials would carry long sticks to measure women's trains, ensuring they didn't exceed the legal length. The records of the Florentine archives are full of detailed reports from these officials describing encounters with indignant citizens. However, Florentines, known for their cunning and resourcefulness, quickly found ingenious ways to circumvent these regulations. If a law prohibited precious jewels on a dress, women would sew them onto their sleeves, which could then be detached and removed before entering an official building. Or they would sew them onto a hat or a separate belt that wasn't explicitly mentioned in the decree. If a law restricted the number of pearls on a necklace Women would simply layer multiple necklaces, each individually compliant but collectively dazzling. They might wear their forbidden finery inside their homes where the prying eyes of officials could not reach, only to reveal it at private gatherings. Foreign visitors often remarked on the apparent disregard for these laws. Diplomatic dispatches from ambassadors visiting Florence frequently remarked on the stunning opulence of the women's clothing, often noting that it seemed to directly contradict the city's supposed sumptuary restrictions. This suggests that while the laws existed on paper, their practical enforcement was spotty at best, especially among the most powerful families. The Medici themselves, despite being at the helm of the government, were often prime examples of opulent display, frequently bending or ignoring the very laws they ostensibly upheld. Their patronage of artists who depicted lavishly dressed figures further undermined the spirit of these regulations. The laws often contained loopholes or special exemptions. For example, a woman might be allowed to wear certain luxurious items if they were part of her dowry and explicitly listed in her marriage contract, implying a pre-existing right to the items before the current law was enacted. This created a legal gray area that resourceful families exploited. Despite their limited success in curbing luxury, sumptuary laws offer fascinating insights into the societal anxieties of the time. They highlight the tension between the desire for individual expression and the communal ideal, between economic prosperity and moral purity. They show a constant push and pull, a dance between the state attempting to control public display and individuals determined to flaunt their wealth and status. Ultimately, the sumptuary laws of Medici Florence were a losing battle against the unstoppable tide of fashion and human vanity. While they might have caused temporary inconvenience or prompted clever subterfuge, they never truly quelled the Florentine passion for dazzling display. Instead, they merely added another layer of intrigue and subtle rebellion to the city's already vibrant sartorial landscape. Number 4. Jewelry, not just bling, but a bank account on display. In Medici Florence, jewelry was far more than mere adornment. It was a concentrated form of wealth, a portable bank account, and a powerful statement of social standing. When a Florentine man or woman wore a magnificent necklace or a ring laden with gemstones, they weren't just accessorizing. They were literally displaying their family's economic might and their personal prestige for all the world to see. Gold, pearls, and precious stones were the undisputed kings of this sparkling realm. Gold was the foundational element, a symbol of enduring value and divinity. Heavy gold chains were incredibly popular, worn by both men and women. These weren't delicate necklaces often, they were substantial links of pure gold, sometimes weighing a significant amount. A man might wear several such chains draped across his doublet, each one a visible testament to his success in commerce or his inherited wealth. These chains could also incorporate medallions, often engraved with family crests or religious symbols. Contemporary accounts by chroniclers like Giovanni Villani describe the lavish display of gold and jewels at Florentine public ceremonies, underscoring their importance in conveying grandeur. Pearls were perhaps the most coveted gemstone of the era, holding an almost mythical allure. Their soft iridescent glow, their perfect spherical shape, and their rarity made them incredibly valuable. Women would wear strands of pearls wound through their hair, forming elaborate coifs, or as multiple necklaces draped across their bodices. Large, perfectly matched pearls were especially prized. The more uniform and lustrous the pearl, the higher its value. The sheer number of pearls a woman wore was a direct indicator of her family's wealth, sometimes to the point of being a financial burden. Wills and dowry contracts from the period offer insights into the value placed on pearls, often listing specific pearl necklaces as significant assets within a woman's dowry. Precious gemstones also played a crucial role. Rubies, with their fiery red hue, were associated with passion, power, and often royalty. Sapphires, deep blue and serene, symbolized truth and heavenly grace. Emeralds, vibrant green, were linked to rebirth and prosperity. Diamonds, though less brilliant in their uncut form than they are today, were still highly valued for their hardness and rarity. These stones were typically cut and cabochon, a smooth, rounded polish that emphasized their color and size rather than their sparkle, as modern facets were not yet common. The rings were significant, worn on every finger, and often multiple rings per finger by both men and women. They might feature a large single gemstone or be intricately carved with symbolic designs. Signet rings, often engraved with a family crest or a merchant's mark, were particularly important for men, used to seal documents and letters, serving a practical function alongside their ornamental value. Brooches and pins were used to fasten garments, but they were also elaborate pieces of jewelry in themselves. The large, ornate brooch, perhaps featuring a cameo or a cluster of gemstones, could be pinned at the neckline of a gamura, drawing attention to the wearer's face and upper body. These could be incredibly intricate works of art crafted by skilled goldsmiths. Jeweled girdles, or belts, were another prominent accessory for women. These often featured segments of gold or silver intertwined with pearls and gemstones, and might hang down the front of a gown, sometimes reaching almost to the hem. These girdles were not merely functional. They were a significant display of wealth, literally encasing the wearer in precious materials. The goldsmiths of Florence were renowned throughout Europe for their exceptional skill. Workshops, often concentrated around the Ponte Vecchio, bustled with activity as artisans hammered, soldered, and polished precious metals, setting stones with meticulous precision. These craftsmen were not just anonymous workers, they were artists, often working closely with wealthy patrons, interpreting their desires into magnificent pieces. Their techniques were sophisticated, involving filigree, enameling, and intricate carving. The cost of labor for such pieces was as significant as the cost of the materials themselves. The choice of specific gemstones or designs could also carry personal or symbolic meaning. A gift of a ruby might signify love and devotion, while an emerald could represent hope or fidelity. Family pieces, passed down through generations, carried immense sentimental and historical value, often being worn with pride during public appearances. The sheer weight of some of these pieces could be considerable, a physical manifestation of the wearer's economic heft. Wearing these magnificent jewels was not just about personal vanity. It was a public performance, a way for wealthy Florentine families to demonstrate their power, their stability, and their connection to a network of global trade that brought these precious materials to their city. It was a silent language, understood by all, proclaiming one's place at the very pinnacle of society. Number 3. Headwear as a crown, the balzo and beyond. In Medici, Florence, the way a person adorned their head was as crucial, if not more so, than the clothes on their body. Headwear for women evolved into intricate architectural statements that could be elaborate, artistic, and deeply symbolic of status and fashion forwardness. While men also wore hats, often simpler caps or wide-brimmed felt hats, it was women's headwear that truly pushed the boundaries of design, with the balzo standing out as one of the most distinctive and surprising trends. The balzo was a truly unique creation, an almost turban-like headdress that gained significant popularity, especially among the elite during the mid-15th century. It was essentially a rounded, padded roll, often quite large, worn at the back of the head, sometimes rising significantly above the crown. Imagine a soft, donut-shaped cushion covered in luxurious fabric, like silk, velvet, or brocade, often matching the wearer's gown. This was then adorned with pearls, jewels, or sometimes even delicate gold chains. The front of the hair was typically parted in the middle and smoothly pulled back, often gathered into a braid or bun at the back, which then tucked into or beneath the balzo. Contemporary Florentine portraiture, including works by Domenico Ghirlandaio and Sandro Botticelli, offers vivid examples of the balzo, often depicting prominent women of the day wearing it with elegance and undeniable poise. The origins of the balzo are debated, some scholars suggesting it might have evolved from earlier padded rolls used to support veils, while others see it as a distinct Florentine innovation. Regardless of its precise genesis, its visual impact was undeniable. It gave the wearer an elevated, almost regal profile, literally raising their perceived height and drawing attention to their face. The construction of a balzo would have been labor-intensive, requiring skilled craftspeople. The padding, likely made of wool or linen, had to be carefully shaped to create the desired volume. Then, the luxurious outer fabric would be meticulously sewn and gathered to achieve a smooth, elegant finish. The addition of pearls, often stitched individually onto the surface, would have been a painstaking process, adding considerably to the cost. The more pearls, the richer the wearer. The balzo was not just a static ornament, it was a dynamic one. As the wearer moved, the pearls might subtly catch the light, creating a shimmering effect. It spoke of refinement, of access to the finest materials, and of a commitment to the latest fashion trends. It was a piece of headwear that truly stood out in a crowd. Beyond the balzo, other forms of headwear flourished. Simple linen coifs or caps were worn by many, often serving as a foundation for more elaborate styles or as a practical covering. These could be plain or edged with delicate embroidery. For married women, head coverings were often a sign of modesty and respectability, though the wealthy found ways to make even these coverings lavish. Veils, often made of fine, transparent silk or gauze, were frequently worn, sometimes draped over the balzo or pinned into the hair. These veils could be long and flowing, adding an ethereal quality to the wearer's appearance, or shorter and more structured. They might be edged with gold thread or small pearls, catching the light as they move. The artistry of hairdressing also played a significant role, even when hidden beneath headwear. The hair was often elaborately styled, braided, or coiled around the head, sometimes incorporating ribbons or pearls directly into the braids. The intricate nature of these hairstyles meant that even if the balzo was removed, the underlying hair was still a work of art. Hairnets, or retenue, sometimes reticella, were also popular, often made of fine gold or silver thread, sometimes studded with small pearls. These nets would encapsulate the hair at the back of the head, sometimes extending down the back. They were delicate, shimmering accessories that framed the face and added a subtle sparkle. The choice of headwear could also reflect marital status. Unmarried girls often wore their hair loose, or simply braided, perhaps adorned with ribbons or small caps. Once married, women were expected to cover their hair, and this was where the balzo, coifs, and veils came into play, signifying their new status. The rules were fluid, however, and exceptions, or regional variations were common. Sumptuary laws often targeted headwear, attempting to regulate the amount of pearls, gold thread, or fabric that could be used. But, like with other forms of luxury, these laws were frequently ignored or circumvented by the fashion-conscious elite. The sheer cost of some of these headpieces, particularly those laden with pearls and made of brocade, meant they were highly valuable possessions, often listed in wills and dowries. A balzo, for example, could be a significant component of a woman's overall dowry, a testament to her family's wealth and her own personal splendor. So, whether it was the imposing balzo, the delicate veil, or the shimmering hairnet, headwear in Medici Florence was never an afterthought. It was a crowning glory, a carefully constructed piece of artistry that announced the wearer's wealth, status, and impeccable taste to the world. Number 2, sleeves that speak volumes, puffs, slashes, and detachment. In Medici Florence, sleeves were not just functional coverings for the arms, they were a dynamic canvas for artistic expression, a loud declaration of wealth, and a constant source of innovation in fashion. From voluminous puffs to artfully placed slashes, and even detachable designs, sleeves evolved into intricate, eye-catching elements that could transform an entire garment and communicate volumes about the wearer's status. The sheer variety and complexity of sleeves are truly astonishing. One of the most striking trends was the puffed sleeve. These sleeves, often seen on both men's doublets and women's gamuras, were gathered at the shoulder and sometimes again at the wrist or elbow, creating a voluminous, rounded shape. Imagine a woman's arm encased in a silken puff that billowed out from her shoulder, creating a dramatic silhouette. These puffs could be enormous, using vast amounts of luxurious fabric like silk or velvet, further emphasizing the wearer's ability to afford such extravagance. The gathering techniques, often using meticulous pleating or ruching, showcased the tailor's skill and the garment's quality. Slashes or tagli were another incredibly popular and visually arresting feature. This trend, which originated in military uniforms, where slashes allowed freedom of movement and revealed the colors of the lining beneath, quickly transitioned into high fashion. Slashes were strategically cut openings in the outer fabric of a sleeve through which a contrasting lining or undergarment fabric would be pulled or puffed, creating a striking layered effect. Imagine a sleeve made of dark velvet, with artfully placed slashes revealing glimpses of shimmering gold brocade or vibrant red silk beneath. The effect was one of controlled chaos, a tantalizing peek at even more luxury underneath. The slashes could be horizontal, vertical, or diagonal, sometimes arranged in intricate patterns or geometric designs. They might be tied together with decorative laces or ribbons, adding another layer of embellishment and allowing for adjustable exposure of the contrasting fabric. This trend was incredibly versatile, appearing on the sleeves of doublets, tunics, and gowns. The sheer volume of fabric required to create a truly impressive slashed and puffed sleeve was considerable, as the inner lining also had to be full enough to puff out. This meant that the cost of such sleeves was substantial, making them a clear indicator of wealth. But perhaps the most intriguing development in Florentine sleeves was their detachability. Many garments, especially women's gamuras and men's doublets, were designed with sleeves that could be completely unlaced and removed. This was a revolutionary concept for several reasons. Firstly, it allowed for incredible versatility. A single gamura could be transformed into multiple outfits simply by swapping out the sleeves. Imagine owning a basic velvet gamura in a rich jewel tone. You could then pair it with sleeves of contrasting silk, or sleeves embroidered with pearls for a special occasion, or even sleeves made of different textures entirely, like brocade or damask. This meant that wealthy individuals could create a seemingly endless wardrobe without having to purchase entirely new garments. Secondly, detachable sleeves were a practical financial investment. The sleeves were often the most elaborate and decorated part of a garment, bearing the brunt of fashion's trends and the heaviest embellishments. By making them detachable, they could be updated, replaced, or simply cleaned more easily than an entire gown. They could also be easily passed down as heirlooms or included as valuable items in a dowry. Records from family inventories, such as those of the Strozzi family, frequently list individual pairs of sleeves, sometimes describing their fabric, color, and embellishments in detail, highlighting their status as valuable separate entities. The mechanism for detachment was typically lacing. Small eyelets were sewn along the shoulder seam of the garment and the top edge of the sleeve. Ribbons or decorative laces would then be threaded through these eyelets, allowing the sleeve to be securely fastened or unlaced at will. These laces themselves could be works of art, made of silk, gold thread, or adorned with small metal points called aglets. The process of lacing and unlacing sleeves would have been a common daily ritual, often requiring the assistance of servants due to the complexity of the lacing and the weight of the fabric. The sleeves themselves often had a complex construction. They might be made of multiple pieces, with the outer fabric slashed to reveal an inner lining, and perhaps padded or stiffened in places to hold their shape. The cuffs, if present, could be wide and turned back, revealing more of the luxurious lining, or intricately embroidered. The very design of these sleeves was a testament to the skill of the Florentine tailors and seamstresses. Their ability to manipulate heavy fabrics, create complex patterns, and integrate detachable elements was a hallmark of their craft. The evolution of sleeves in Medici, Florence perfectly illustrates the dynamic nature of Renaissance fashion, a blend of lavish display, ingenious practicality, and a relentless pursuit of visual impact, all designed to reinforce social standing and project an image of effortless, undeniable wealth. Number 1. The Gamura, Florence's power dress. If you wanted to understand the absolute heart of female fashion in Medici, Florence, you needed to look no further than the Gomurra. This wasn't just a dress, it was the quintessential Florentine gown, a meticulously crafted garment that served as both a foundation for lavish display and a powerful statement of social standing, wealth, and impeccable taste. It was worn by women of all ages, from young girls to venerable matriarchs, evolving subtly through the decades but always remaining the core of a respectable and fashionable lady's wardrobe. The Gomurra was typically a relatively fitted gown for its time, designed to highlight the torso and waist before flowing into a voluminous skirt. The bodice was often stiffened or lightly boned, creating a smooth, elegant line from the shoulders down to the natural waist, or slightly below. This emphasis on a controlled, refined upper body provided a stark contrast to the often dramatic sleeves and voluminous skirts, creating a harmonious silhouette. The neckline of a Gomurra varied, but was commonly a high, rounded, or slightly square neckline, often adorned with a small ruffle or a band of contrasting fabric. For younger women, or in less formal settings, a wider, lower neckline might be seen, sometimes filled in with a chemise or partlet. The true magic of the Gomurra lay in its versatility and its ability to showcase the incredibly rich fabrics for which Florence was famous. Imagine a Gomurra made of deep crimson velvet, so opulent it seemed to absorb all light, or a shimmering blue silk damask with intricate woven patterns. These were not simply beautiful, they were incredibly expensive, a testament to the wearer's access to the finest Florentine looms and the city's vast mercantile networks. Records from the city's wool guild, the Arte della Lana, and silk guild, the Arte della Seta, frequently detail the significant quantities of fabric required to construct even one of these gowns. The skirts of the Gomurra were full and often heavily pleated, designed to sweep gracefully to the floor. The amount of fabric in the skirt could be enormous, contributing to the gown's weight and luxurious drape. As a woman moved, the skirt would sway and rustle, creating a symphony of sound and movement that complemented the visual splendor. The hem was often lined with a stiffer, darker fabric or even fur, not just for warmth, but also to protect the expensive outer fabric from the grime of the streets and to add weight, ensuring a beautiful drape. Perhaps the most characteristic feature of the Gomurra, and often the most changeable and decorative, were its sleeves. As explored in a previous chapter, these could be incredibly elaborate, often featuring large puffs at the shoulder, dramatic slashes that revealed contrasting linings, or intricate embroidery. Crucially, many Gomurras were designed with detachable sleeves fastened to the bodice with laces or pins. This ingenious design allowed for immense versatility. A single Gomurra could be paired with multiple sets of sleeves, transforming its look from everyday elegance to ceremonial grandeur simply by swapping out the sleeves. This also meant that valuable, heavily embellished sleeves could be preserved, updated, or even pawned, making the Gomurra a smart, if luxurious, investment. The Gomurra was typically worn over a simple linen chemise or shift, which served as a protective layer between the body and the outer garment, and also absorbed sweat and oils, making the outer gown easier to keep clean. Sometimes a partlet, a separate modesty piece, would be worn over the chemise to fill in a lower neckline. The garment was generally fastened by lacing up the front, back, or sides, allowing for a close fit and adaptation to the wearer's figure. The laces themselves could be simple cords or elaborate ribbons with metal tips, adding another touch of luxury. For wealthier women, the Gomurra was often complemented by an overgown, such as the flowing giornia, adding another layer of opulence and allowing for even more complex layering of fabrics and colors. But even without the giornia, a Gomurra alone was a powerful statement. The construction of a Gomurra was a significant undertaking requiring skilled tailors and seamstresses. They would meticulously cut, sew, and fit the heavy fabrics, often by hand, ensuring that every pleat fell perfectly and every seam was invisible. The cost of labor, combined with the cost of the materials, meant that a Gomurra was a serious investment, equivalent to buying a small house or several acres of land. Inventories from prominent Florentine families like the Medici and the Pitti frequently list numerous chimeras in a woman's wardrobe, often specifying the fabric, color, and any unique embellishments. These lists are not just dry records. They are snapshots of immense personal wealth and the importance placed on sartorial display within Florentine society. The chimera, therefore, was more than just clothing. It was a carefully constructed symbol of family prosperity, social standing, and personal refinement. It represented the pinnacle of Florentine textile artistry and was a testament to the city's economic power, literally clothing its elite in luxury and proclaiming their status to the world.